councillors are completely written out of the process. It may be true, but it may be poor governance. Thank you very much, committee.
Muted myself. You have a question. You're on mute again, Clive.
I do. I'm out of the habit already, committee. That's the nature of retirement or semi-retirement. So these are questions on something I raised back in November, and I'm told they are in the minutes now, so that's great. And it's about record retention. So that's retaining records after the issue has been completed. So my question one is that in November we said it might be something we look to put on, you look to put on the work programme, and I believe this is the meeting where you might be considering to do that. And there's an answer from the officer, who's Ben Hukin, who says if you think it's a priority area, then do so. So I'll let you guys discuss that when time is right. Question two is the one I'd like to follow up, if I may. So the officer, Ben Hukin, says that the current retention schedule is drawn from the Local Government Association guidance. It looks only at the statutory and the regulatory requirements. I've looked this up back in November, and this was either 2014 or before. So we're now a good 7 years ahead, and we need to review this, in my view. And interestingly, so does the Ombudsman. Fascinating. It was pointed out to me this morning that a report into Bristol City Council, which came out on the 20th of January this year, so you guys won't have seen it yet. It says it's about the council's failure to keep records. The local government ombudsman says, and I quote at paragraph 22, the council should set out for me, so that's not for Clive, that's for the ombudsman, steps which will be taken to improve record retention. And I can give whoever's interested the ombudsman's reference. My view was, I think you should also do that. And the particular bit of casework that I was looking into last year that prompted this was investigation into alleged malpractice, or poor in practice rather, in a recipient of council grants. And the council has policies such that if an organisation receives grants, has accusations of something or other, then the council will investigate. Well, they did. They investigated in January 2020, and this was relating to a death, pre-COVID, so not COVID related, allegedly due to poor employment practices at an organisation that receives grants from the council. The council supposedly investigated in January 2020, and then one of the people very closely related to the deceased asked for some follow-up in that spring 2020, and they were told, sorry, we haven't kept any records. Now, this is just like 3 or 4 months after the investigation. And the reason that they didn't keep any records was it wasn't statutory, it wasn't necessary. So it strikes me that the council keeps an absolute legal minimum of records, and I think it should consider more. You might wish to set off some work, or you might say you should keep all records for 6 months or something like that. I leave that up to you, but I think that you guys, you've got mild-mannered me, and you've got the Ombudsman, both telling you to do the same thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clive. Well, personally, I won't be doing anything at all because this is my last meeting. but we'll keep it in mind, and we want to make recommendations to next year's audit committee on a number of different areas, and that seems like a good candidate to me. So yeah, well, I've made a note of it, so when we get to work program, we can briefly decide whether we want to do it. So thanks for raising that. Yeah, okay. Thank you, Clive, and all the best. Okay, moving an item up the agenda because Mike Jackson is with us and is going to introduce the item.
Sorry, Chair, just to intervene, Councillor Gollop also has a statement before we can get to
beg your pardon.
that report.
Okay.
As long as you're going to take it, Chair, I'm happy you take Mike now, and I'll do that before the item on the financial accounts.
Okay, if I forget, yeah. Okay, then we will move to the annual governance statement. Mike.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks to you and the rest of the committee for accommodating my timing, because I was keen to come and be part of the discussion about this report, Chair, and thanks for the chance just to say perhaps a few introductory remarks, and then with the help of colleagues, happy to answer any questions. The first thing I wanted to say is just to welcome the acknowledgement from the Chief Internal Auditor of the positive improvement trajectory. The leadership team are very conscious we've still got some way to go, but it is good to see that we've got independent validation of that improvement journey. In particular, Simba's highlighted that we have made quite a bit of progress in catching up with some long-standing audit actions, and that there is now a much better understanding of the importance of the internal audit function. And I think Simba is experiencing a much more kind of collaborative approach with managers across the organisation now that understanding of the role of audit in driving improvement is better understood. The report talks at some length about the root cause analysis that we've done and highlights the fact that working in a very complex and challenging environment, particularly over the last couple of years, has created significant challenges for us and for the council, and as well as the need to continue to rationalise the number of priorities we're pursuing, because I think a key part of the root cause analysis is that the council just tries to do too much, and we need to be much clearer about the priorities that we're focusing on at any particular time. It also highlights some other issues which we're addressing through the action plan, which is attached. For instance, making sure that we've got capacity in the right places based on the evidence that the audit process has identified. So, for instance, the council's invested recently in our capacity around equalities and inclusion, which was one of the governance risks highlighted. And we've also recently secured significant capacity and external expertise, for instance, through the strategic partnership that GNR have secured with Arcadis and others to improve the council's delivery record around capital projects and major schemes. As well as just the relentless need to focus on the management actions that are in those audit outcomes that we've worked with Simba and the team on. So I'll stop there, Chair, just to give make sure there's time for the committee to ask any questions. But as I say, it's pleasing to see the recognition of the improvement that we're making, but we're under no illusion that there's still some way to go, and hopefully the report sets out the kind of areas that we're focusing on, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anybody with any questions or points to make? No, they all seem happy. Well, thank you very much, Mike.
Okay, and thanks for accommodating me again, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's that one down. Next we have the work program. Clearly we're not setting any more work program items for ourselves because this is the last one of the year. But what I thought we might want to do was to list 2 or 3 things that we might want the next audit committee to consider looking at. We can't make them, but we can ask, I think. Clive's clearly suggested that the policy on the retention of records, and unless anybody objects, it seems like a reasonable thing to do, just to look at and see whether we're doing the right thing. Other things that occur to me are the ongoing IT rollout, which that shouldn't be lost track of. I thought of some other ones that will come back to me in a moment. Oh, send, of course, and also the whistleblowing policy. Those are the ones I thought of that they might want to, because it's going to be almost entirely new people, and they pass the note to them, as it were. Anybody else got anything else they think should be included? Jeff?
It's only a general thing, and we're looking at the governance guidelines review, and it just seems to me that the general sort of corporate governance and how these decisions are taken is something that is pretty fundamental. I found myself reading that report and thinking that I wasn't quite sure that with all the papers we have on governance that we've actually produced as an authority decisions taken the right way and as effectively as we'd like. And I just wonder, therefore, whether that isn't something that we actually ought to be doing a bit more of a review on, how the accountability and the decision pathway, not that we should be determining those, but how they work to effectively produce good governance. And that includes things like the forward plan and how it fits into the scrutiny process. So a whole series of related things that are not happening quite as they should.
So if to put it in, because this is going to be a quick note, if we say governance and the decision-making process, would that do? Yeah. Okay. Right then. That's that one. Work program gone. So next we have the Grant Thornton report. Right, is John here with us?
He was with us.
Hi, Chair. Hi, sorry, just taking time to get the technology going. Do you want to do Councillor Gollop's public statement before we get onto our
yes.
item? So,
yeah, okay, that'd be a good idea. Jeff, if you'd want to do a public statement now.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So I start off with the apology that there's something about 3 days notice, working days notice in advance of an audit committee that comes straight after a full council meeting that I cannot get right. But I took the view that if I put my questions in as a form of statement, it gave a chance to raise them, because these are things that I think are important to me in determining whether I can accept the accounts or not. And I thought by doing it this way, I was also giving Denise notice of my questions rather than springing them on her at the meeting. So they fell into 3 categories. One is the Bristol Beacon series of questions. What I'm really saying is, having seen the pictures that appeared in the local media, I find it difficult to see how there can be any value attached to that site at the moment. And I would just like to know what value we're carrying it at and whether that is justifiable, given that we've got to start from scratch to build a concert hall. So that was one. The second question was relating to a series of questions relating to Bristol Energy. My understanding is that the accounts, that our auditors look at the accounts and consider whether they are true and fair. Now, I'm looking at the notes, and I think I am probably as informed as most councillors on the holding company, the energy company, and the company related issues. I read that. Now, I can't begin to comprehend what it's trying to tell me. And I'm simply saying that I would like that presented in a way that was actually understandable and that provided councillors and members of the public with the information that they're asking for in respect of Bristol Energy. And that's partly why I started to prepare a note as far as I could that I thought summarised the position. There was an aside there as well that I was slightly surprised about the fact that it was identified as a post-balance sheet event when we've been discussing this at Audit Committee for at least 6 months. So I didn't see why that came as a surprise. And then the other questions were relating to property valuation, whether it related to retail property, whether there were going to be further impairments needed this year as a result of COVID. So it was just trying to understand the situation. So that's just a summary of the issues that I was raising. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jeff. So Denise, would you like to clear things up for Jeff?
Yeah, so Chair, I'm not sure how you want to actually progress with today's meeting. There are a number of questions there, and we have actually, or in the process of, if it hasn't gone yet, doing a full written response to Councillor Gollop, answering all of the questions. And I think some of it was also covered at the training session that took place. So I think I'm going to be guided by yourself, Chair, in terms of how you want to go through it, because there are a number of questions. Do you want to go through each one, or do you want to, do you want to select a few, or do you want to wait for the written response?
Jeff's mentioned that he would be hesitant to vote for the accounts. So if we go down the written response route, by the time he gets it, this meeting will be long gone. And Jeff would not have had the opportunity to vote for the accounts. Yep. So I think, in the interest of smooth running, if you could briefly address the issues that Jeff raises.
So I'll hand over to Mike, but we have formulated a response, but I think it will be, a number of them are aligned, so we can probably give an overarching response, particularly to the one in relation to Bristol Beacon, maybe give a summarised response to the sections of questions and maybe some specifics where it's appropriate.
Okay.
And if there's more, then Councillor Gollop can outline any specifics that he wants further clarity on. So Mike,
Okay.
can I hand over to you to maybe take us through and do them by block potentially?
Yeah, so if I talk about Bristol Beacon first, so it's included under land and buildings, under property, plant and equipment, and the carrying value as at the 31st of March is 20 million. And this is based on the existing use, so the valuation of Bristol Beacon at the previous use, and then the historic cost of works up until that date. That does include the phase one for the new foyer building, which I think we're just getting the numbers, but it was around 6 or 7 million. So significant amount of that valuation is the foyer, which was complete and obviously not part of the current works ongoing. In terms of further valuation, our process and accounting, we account for the historic cost during the year it was capitalised. When the asset is complete, our property team will undertake a full valuation of that property, and any impairment on what has been spent to that point will be impaired on the carrying value. While it's still an asset under construction, we'll continue to charge the cost of it to that project, and then any impairment will come through at the end once that asset is operational. As it's grant funded, we expect there is likely to be a downward valuation of that, but not necessary. We haven't done the valuation yet under current use, as it's still under construction.
Okay.
So my question on that, and I am not now fluent in accounting standards, if I ever was, but I'm not aware that there is a policy for assets under demolition. But it just seems to me that to value a historic value, a building that has been totally demolished and doesn't exist, is a concept I find very hard to get my mind around, and I can't see how one can simply take a value, add the cost of demolition to it, and carry it at that value when you have absolutely nothing other than a piece of land.
So just in terms of clarity, in terms of the Bristol Beacon, the proposed approach was the planned approach in terms of the work. So the work had always anticipated that the asset would be, or the interior would be stripped out to actually before reinstating. So therefore it was always planned that this would be a construction phase. So it's not a demolition in the sense of demolition it down to the ground, and therefore then it has no value. It's the course of the work that was proposed that you would strip out the interior and rebuild it.
Okay,
I think we might have to differ on that, because if I look at the pictures I've seen, I don't see much of an asset left. So that's where I have a difficulty.
okay. So what were the other things? There was the retail premises and what was the other one?
If I cover
Energy was the
Bristol
Well,
Energy.
yeah.
So we've got.
Could I perhaps just give an audit view on the Bristol Beacon at this stage?
Okay.
Yeah, and I think this is obviously is new information that comes to us relatively late on in the audit, but the point about the valuation being the previous valuation plus works is right. It's also important to reflect that the valuation that we're particularly looking at is 31st of March 2020, not the one that will be in 2021. In terms of then the transparency in this statement of accounts about what's going on with Bristol Beacon, it was the post-balance sheet event disclosure that again we felt was an important element to ensure that the accounts were clear on the matter. But again, you have to bear in mind this is the accounting date is the 31st of March 2020, and the post-balance sheet event is sort of bringing us up to date from the 31st of March 2020.
Okay. So we have Bristol Energy and the retail premises.
So in terms of Bristol Energy, so just to go through some of the questions, try and broadly cover it as well. So the 19.5 million impairment, as noted in note 5, is what's required, the further impairment required in 1920 to bring the carrying value to 1.4 million. And that leaves, in response to question 4, a further 1.4 million required impairment in 2021 if that were deemed to reduce to nil, as we anticipate, and that's noted in the post-balance sheet event that it would require a further impairment of 1.4 million to bring that to zero. The risk reserve and the 7.3 million, which is identified as part of the indemnity, is in addition to the current impairment of 35 million and the agreed investment total of 36.5 million. In terms of the valuation of 1.4 million in the accounts, whilst the post-balance sheet event note makes reference to that this may be reduced further to a valuation of nil. This was an estimate as at the 31st of March 2020. So since then, and through the sales proceeds obviously process, and as the year has gone on, things have changed and developed, but materially, and some of those events are non-adjusting post-balance sheet events, so they reflect the valuation subsequent to that date. So we didn't feel that it was necessary to change anything in the valuation as at that 31st of March. And you'll note Grant Thornton's have audited that and made comments in their ISA 260 around the valuation of Bristol Energy. Question 7 around the audit requiring, I think that was misworded in our report. In the draft accounts, we did note the post-balance sheet event relating to Bristol Energy. However, at that point in time, the decision or the progression of the sales and the breakup of Bristol Energy hadn't significantly proceeded to allow us to give an accurate financial estimate. So within the final accounts, we've now reviewed that and included a lot more information now. We have it as to the final impact of that decision. We had included it as an event, the decision to sell and wind up the company, but we didn't include the financial information because at that point, the estimates of the likely impact were too uncertain at the time. In terms of the movement between the 10th of November of the signing of the Bristol Energy accounts and the Bristol Holding accounts, any movement between those two dates would be a non-adjusting post-balance sheet event. So it wouldn't lead to any change in impairment as part of the final accounts for the either holding or ourselves. I'll rattle through these. So then in terms of interest receivable on the preference shares, there's accrued interest on the preference shares of 4.5 million as at the 31st of March 2020. However, this is because the nature of preference shares rather than ordinary shares, we're required to accrue that preference share interest. However, it we have provided for it in full every year, as it wasn't anticipated in the business plan. It's more of a technical requirement that we're required to accrue that interest income, but we haven't sort of brought any into as income into the council because it wasn't planned in the business plan and been fully provided for in the accounts. All the related party transactions between the council and subsidiaries are detailed in note 37 on the related parties, so you'll be able to see all the transactions there. And then in terms of the table, the total investment in Bristol Energy was 36.5 million, and then the indemnity of 7.3 million, which is earmarked, and it's indemnity up to. Obviously, the final amount that will be required will be dependent on the progress of that wind down of the company and any liabilities that could arise up to the end of March 2023. The preference share interest isn't a direct cost, so it's not included in the total cost to the council. We'll send formal written responses to all those with further detail. But if there's any other questions,
he asked a question about retail properties.
So Chair, can I just come back on that because so thank you, Michael. That's clarified a lot. But my question still is that I couldn't understand the post balance sheet event note when I thought I knew what the situation was. So if that's the case, the chance of anyone who doesn't know the situation understanding the post-balance sheet event note can't be very high. And I'm therefore asking why there can't be a note that actually quantifies the full loss and the years in which the impairment or the provision has been made, so that it's clear, rather than referring to it from a series of different totals that have to be added together by the individual to try and work out the true cost. I know we don't want to put the Bristol Energy losses in a headline figure, but actually we can't ignore the fact that it's happened, and putting it in almost as a series of riddles to work out what it totals didn't seem to me to be the best way of portraying it. So it's really just a plea of can we present it in an open way that's clear for all to see.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. So there was finally a question on the retail properties affected by COVID-19.
Yeah, so no, sorry, let me just, so in terms of the investment property revaluation, this was so in the cover, this is noted as an adjustment in the ISA 260 report. Our investment properties were revised down by 9.5 million. We do the valuations between October and March, and then apply an indices to bring those values up to the 31st of March 2020. Obviously, those values, those indices and growth and changes in valuation are sort of updated retrospectively by various bodies. So our property advisors advised us of the 9.5 million, 8 million related to minus 10.7% on our retail commercial property. So 8 million was for retail, with 0.7 million for offices and industrial properties respectively. This was updated information, which therefore it was an adjustment from the draft accounts. So in terms of anticipating reduction for the 2021 accounts, obviously we haven't gone through the full process of valuing all of those properties, and there may be. However, we believe under note 4 we provide information regarding the uncertainty of estimates and assumptions we make, particularly including our valuation of both our PPE and commercial property and the impacts of those and the significant impact. So we feel under note 4 we provide sufficient information with regard to the impact of that and possibility on COVID on the material uncertainty of those valuations in the accounts.
Thank you, Michael. Right, so that's just public forum. So John, are you still with us?
Thank you, Chair. And if I could start by that that disclosure about material uncertainty, because it then flows into the opinion that we're proposing on the accounts, and we'll have heard and discussed fully at the last meeting our proposal to issue a qualified conclusion on the value for money arrangements, which we can confirm today that that provisional view that we expressed at the last meeting is continued, and that will be our view, and that will be our opinion that we will be issuing. So that's a accept for conclusion on the value for money for the reasons that we discussed at committee last time around about the governance of the council's arrangements regarding its companies, with particular focus to Bristol Energy. The accounts opinion is a positive in that the work has been undertaken and delivered earlier than in recent years. You'll recall that last year it was the 31st of July that we were signing. I think the year before, the previous auditors were signing in May. So our proposal is that we are able to sign at this stage now in March, and that it will be an unqualified audit opinion. The nuance to that is that the material uncertainty that the council discloses regarding its property valuations impacted by COVID and following the guidance of the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors is that that should be highlighted as a material uncertainty, and our audit report reflects on that as an emphasis of matter. So that's an unqualified audit report, but we are emphasizing that this is an important statement within your accounts. So that's the sort of the technical explanation for both our accounts opinion and our value for money conclusion. The same applies to property valuations when it comes to pensions investments, and that's consistently going to be reflected in our audit report. Then Jackson will now take you through some of the main areas of work on the accounts. And it's, as you would expect, council of the size and complexity of Bristol, there's a lot in there. There's a lot to this audit. A lot of detail around the valuations work and challenge that we did, which included engaging with our own valuation team. A lot of detail around trying to capture the story when it comes to both Bristol Energy and the Beacon, in terms of getting right the actual timing of both the accounting matters and then the post-balance sheet event disclosures around those. And again, Jackson can explain a little bit about why we say that certain things are non-adjusting post-balance sheet events and when we do it. There will also be members' interest in our consideration of a public interest report around the Bristol Energy situation. And I explained at the last meeting that there would be three elements to this consideration. And the element that you would have seen reported fully was the middle bit. So we reported fully our middle bit of assessment in 1920 around the factors and the communication that led up to the decision to sell the company. We've also given consideration to the council's decision making and document trail when it comes to the decision to establish the company in the first place. And that work is nearing completion now. And then the third stage of it is the bit that we haven't been able to really address until we've got to today around the details of the public details of the disposal, the impairments, the process used to then ensure that when the council disposed of Bristol Energy, it got the most appropriate outcomes that it could from the situation that it was facing. Now we've got the detail of where that ended up now. One stage that I do want to complete before I put everything together is to involve some of our restructuring colleagues who deal with asset disposals of this nature for business, to get their views on the reasonableness of the council's process that it followed and the eventual deal that it struck. regarding that. So there's still some work to do around completing those elements, which we will bring back to the new committee now. But we've certainly covered off the big chunk of it, which was the value for money conclusion part of it, which is reflected in our proposal to qualify the opinion. Jackson, do you want to just maybe bring out some of the more technical areas of the audit before we take members' questions, please?
Yeah, thanks, John. Good afternoon, everyone. So what I thought I might do is quickly run through the significant audit risks that we identified when we issued our audit plan. So this is beginning on agenda pack page 18 of the report. So that's the supplementary papers pack. And the first area was around COVID-19. And John has already explained the impact of that on our enhanced auditors report and the fact that property valuations were reported on a material uncertainty basis, and the council has made disclosures to that effect within the notes to its financial statements. I think at this stage it would also be remiss of us not to reflect that this is the first time either auditors or the finance team have had to complete a fully remote audit. So that has taken longer in some parts than either of us would have expected due to some of the inherent inefficiencies. I think on the positive side, there are probably areas of the audit that have probably worked a little better by doing them remotely. So moving forward, we're committed to working with finance colleagues to ensure that we get the right blend of remote but also face-to-face audit to make sure that we continue to move that sign-off date forward, as John's already alluded to. Over the page, management override of controls is a presumed significant risk at all entities. We made a recommendation, you may remember, in our 2018-19 audit report around journal authorization. In the progress follow-up in Appendix B, we note that there, unsurprisingly, given the timing, were still some journals that have not been authorized. We note that the council is and has implemented a new journals authorization policy. However, due to the timing of our 2018-19 audit reporting, the 19-20 financial year had already begun before that management recommendation, or before our recommendation, apologies, was accepted by management and implemented. So we would expect and hope that from next year, 2021, that recommendation has been now fully implemented, but we do just need to bring that to the committee's attention. That being said, in our assessment of journals and our sample testing of journals, we didn't identify any instances or any evidence of management override of controls within the testing that we did. As John said, there's lots of information on the valuation of land and buildings, which is set out on page 20 and then subsequent pages in the report, including some of the findings from our own auditors expert and some of the adjustments that were made to the financial statements and some of the adjustments that remain unadjusted in respect of property valuations. We're satisfied that in respect of any unadjusted items, they're not individually or cumulatively material to the financial statements. I wasn't going to go through in lots of detail, but we have also made a recommendation in respect of some of the valuations process, as we identified a small number of items where supporting evidence wasn't available. And this, as committee will be aware from previous discussions, this continues to be an increased area of focus for auditors and regulators alike. So this again is a 2019-20 saw a lot more challenge and skepticism and testing from ourselves. So this is expected from the process and what we've seen in other large authorities as well. And we're making similar recommendations there. Over the page 21, there was a new payroll system implemented from the 1st of April in the financial year. We note that although the system differences weren't fully reported following the system going live, we didn't identify any significant issues in that data transfer from the old system to the new system. There were some small variances, but we were satisfied that the transfer was materially accurate and complete, and that payroll data and costs recorded in the financial statements were materially correct. And below that, valuation of long-term investments, we've already discussed in part Bristol Energy, and I'll come on to that again shortly. This risk also covers the council's unquoted equity investment in the port, and I'll come on to the valuation of that again shortly as well. Over the page, we talk about investment properties, which we've covered in a little bit of detail already following Councillor Gollop's public forum question. There was a reduction which we've touched on, and Mike has provided an answer to that. And we were also satisfied that the council's pension fund net liability was reasonably stated. Page 24 of the agenda pack, we set out the risks identified in respect of our group responsibilities. So we're the council's single entity accounts auditor, but we also audit the group audit, which incorporates the council's subsidiaries. And we set out on this page some of the consolidation adjustments that were identified as a result of the company audits undertaken by PricewaterhouseCoopers and that final consolidation of that into the council group. Another key element that we're discussing with a number of authorities, page 25, is the dedicated schools grant, so that the council has an overspent position on DSG. It's holding a negative reserve within its total schools reserve, which form part of the general fund. In terms of the auditor view, Grant Thornton view is that you should not be holding negative reserves. Those should be held against the general fund. Within the movement in reserves and balance sheet, that is the case. And we also note that moving forwards, government has introduced a statutory override in respect of this for accounting years beginning 1st of April 2020, 21 and 22, and that they will review this following that period in terms of the accounting for dedicated schools grant. So that's a live issue and one that government has taken action on in respect of statutory override moving forwards. As John said and I said, there's lots of detail over the coming pages then around land and buildings and the valuations and the procedures that we've undertaken along with pensions. I wasn't going to spend a huge amount of time on those. However, page 30 and 31, we cover the investment in First Corporate Shipping, so the Bristol Port and also Bristol Holdings Limited. So in terms of the Bristol Port Company, management engaged their own valuation expert this year following a recommendation in our 18-19 audit report. We also engaged our own valuations colleagues to review that valuation. We were satisfied that that valuation was materially accurate, was materially appropriate. As always, this is an estimate, so our valuations colleagues suggested a slightly different range for some of the assumptions used within that valuation. At the highest range, given there's a number of variables, this would have led to a valuation being £1 million lower than that's reported in the balance sheet. We're satisfied there's not a material estimation uncertainty within that, and our colleagues were satisfied that overall the holding value or the carrying value of that investment in the balance sheet of £27 million was appropriate. Moving on to Bristol Holdings, as we've already discussed in part, the valuation of Bristol Energy. So there was a revision from the draft accounts to the final accounts down to the value of 1.4 million in respect of Bristol Energy. We again engaged our valuations colleagues to consider the valuation of Bristol Holdings in total and also within Bristol Energy. They were satisfied that the revised valuation of 1.4 million and the methodology adopted to derive this was appropriate for the industry and that the inputs appeared reasonable. In their view, 1.4 million was not an unreasonable valuation, although they noted that's probably the higher or the highest end of the range. Clearly, the other end of the range would be zero. So once again, there's not a material estimation uncertainty there between what the council is holding the investment at in its balance sheet at 31st of March 2020. So we were satisfied that materially that valuation was appropriate for the Bristol Energy element of the Bristol Holdings investment. And we also considered updated post-balance sheet events disclosures that we've also touched on following Councillor Gollop's public forum statement. There's a lot more information in this report, a lot of which we're required to report via our auditing standards. The appendices beginning page 39 set out the recommendations that we've raised following our 1920 audit, and bearing bearing in mind there are still a final few sample items remain to close down, but that the recommendations we've identified and also management's response to those recommendations. Following that is our follow-up of prior year recommendations. And as I said, some of those are showing us not yet implemented, some of those partly due to the timing of our 18-19 recommendations. So we would hope that all of those that haven't yet been shown as cleared will be cleared for the 2021 financial year. And then Appendix C, page 43 of the agenda pack onwards, sets out the various adjustments to the financial statements, disclosure changes, classification adjustments, unadjusted misstatements set out on page 46, and some of the estimation uncertainty and other issues. So these are not necessarily errors, these are slight differences in estimation technique, or indeed extrapolated areas where, because we test on a sample basis, we may have found a small error, but we're then required to extrapolate that over the entire population. So that's an auditor tool to assess whether we have a sufficient assurance. We wouldn't expect the council to adjust its financial statements for an extrapolated error. I will probably pause there because that's a lot of information, and I realise it's a long report as well, and invite members and colleagues for any questions.
Does anybody have any questions or points to make? Tim?
Thanks. Yeah, that was a lot to take in. Apologies, I'm not 100% today, so I will do my best. On the Bristol Energy then, because I was listening particularly to what Michael said, and I understand it completely what he was saying regarding the issue of the preferential shares, it not being a formal loss. So I'll put that to one side. So we have a figure, which is the amount the council lent, stroke invested in the company, which I think is about 36.5 million. And then we have the reserve, which is about 7.3 million, which is to do with, I guess, the final sale of the company. And I think I noted that Michael sort of said that we might not be calling on all of that reserve. And then that together gave you sort of the total loss stroke exposure regarding Bristol Energy. I did want to ask, in 2015, when Bristol Energy was established, there was a resolution of the cabinet which actually said the setup costs of Bristol Energy had to be repaid, and all officer time spent on that had to be repaid. When either one was that repayment made, or two, was that policy changed by cabinet?
Probably one for officers to reflect on rather than ourselves.
Yeah. Perhaps we could save that one and Denise can answer when we come to the statement of accounts themselves.
Yeah, I think I would need to take it back and double check. I'm not aware that it was repaid. I thought it was part of the initial investment of 36.5, but I'd need to go back to 2015-16 to try and just be clear whether or not it did come back to the council. So it won't be an answer today, but I can provide a written response back when I've reviewed it in more depth.
Thank you. That'd be appreciated, because it's something which constantly sort of scratches at the back of my mind. It's just, we know from Portsmouth, I think they wound up their energy company just before launch. And I believe that they were talking about a cost of around £2 million they'd invested at that point. And that was without giving them the cash. That was just establishing the company. I guess a lot of that might have been officer time. But it was a resolution passed at the time. And I'm just wondering if that should be, obviously is not a material issue, it's not 15 million or whatever, but whether or not that should be accounted for when we talk about Bristol Energy and the cost of the council.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Jeff.
Yeah, a couple of points, Chair. The first one on the issue regarding journals not being approved. I mean, it's reassuring that there were no problems as a result of that, and I wouldn't expect there to be. But I just wonder whether it isn't something we might ask internal audit to have done a little work on around about this year end, to just check that the process really is working and that we're not waiting for our external auditors to report on the next year's accounts. So that was one issue. There was then a question, and I'm dotting about here. I do apologise. On page 24, which was the consolidation adjustments, I couldn't understand the wording because it says that the Bristol Energy accounts, when they were produced, showed higher expenditure than was anticipated. And I'm assuming that's not the 4.5 million of preference share interest that we were talking about. So I'm actually just interested in what it was that came out different in the final accounts to the ones that we were expecting. On page 39, there was a minor, well, not a minor, significant comment there about the fact that the council's accounting system did not allow for production of year-end listing of debtors. And I looked at that and just thought, how did we ever end up with a system that didn't allow that? And are we happy that that is now working properly? And I think I've got one other, but at the moment I'm struggling to find it. Oh, yeah, the other one was the port, talking about evaluation of investments. And I have a different worry about investments that are falling in value, which was the Bristol Energy one, to the issue of the port company. Not for now, but I would be really interested to know how much we had to pay to get an expert to value the port company shares, because whatever that value is just goes to a reserve, and it's not money we can spend. And whilst we've got to put a realistic figure on there, it worries me if we're paying advisors each year to tell us what an investment is worth that we aren't able to realise. So I would, away from this meeting, just like to know what that figure was. Thank you, Chair.
And I can perhaps help with that last question rather than giving the specific answer as asked. The principle of using experts to help with estimates, and then the auditors ensuring that they have appropriate skills from an expertise to challenge that is an important one, sort of regardless of the fact whether it's represents real money or not. It's by its nature you still have to be able to provide good accounting estimation, and the use of experts is the best way you can do it in something like this. So this is something that we would continue to push the council to have, because we know that our regulator would push us to do it, because that's what they would have expected from the territory that we're in.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
Any questions from anybody else? No. Okay, in that case, we'll move on to the next item.
Sorry, I wasn't sure. Councillor Gollop's questions weren't fully answered. I wasn't sure if Jackson was going to answer the point in relation to the consolidation variations and the fact that Bristol Energy have been valued on a breakup cost and the reasons for your movements.
Okay, yeah. Jackson.
Yes, that's fine. So I think the comment from Jeff is on our group audit slide, which reflects that, as Denise said, from Bristol Energy draft accounts, which were used to consolidate into the draft group accounts, and Bristol Energy's final audited accounts, the expenditure within those increased by 4.5 million, and that reflects some of the changes required to move from a going concern basis, which the draft were produced on, to a breakup basis. So those adjustments were audited by the component auditor, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then the council then reflects the final audited financial statements into the group. So that those were the adjustments on that. Just on the point around debtors, this is again an issue that we identify in a number of organisations. So whilst the council is able to run a report to say what are the outstanding invoices within its debtors control account, for example, due to the way that the ledger's set up and functions, and finance colleagues may want to just clarify if I say anything wrong, but it's really difficult to identify balances brought forward, subsequent reversals of accruals, etc., to get to a position where we've got a transactional listing for all different debtor codes or creditor codes, as at the year end from which we're able to sample. So we end up having a transactional listing almost going from 1st of April at the beginning of the financial year to 31st of March at the end. And then when we start sampling items, we may pick an item that was actually paid in year and wasn't a debtor. And that's due to the way that the ledger was set up. So we've been discussing that with finance colleagues to enable them to set the ledger up and set reports up. So it's just those outstanding balances at year end. I don't know if Mike or Denise wanted to say anything further on that, but that's the challenge that we have in respect of the debtor and creditor point.
The Chair, my point would be, if the auditors have a challenge with that, then internal accounts must have a challenge with it as well. So therefore that is something that I would have said we need to have capable of being managed, because the aged debtors are always an ongoing problem. On the 4.5 million on Bristol Energy, the reason I asked it is because the next two items talked about converting to the breakup basis, but that first item didn't, and it didn't actually clarify. Now I understand that. I can see why that adjustment's come in.
Thanks, Jeff. Okay, right then. Item 9, the statement of accounts, and Denise is leading on that one, I believe.
I'll introduce this one, Chair. Thank you. So obviously you've seen the ISA 260 audit findings report from Grant Thornton. As noted, there's a few final sample items outstanding, but what's presented for you in this report is our annual accounts for 1920 for approval. I'll highlight the key changes. So the draft accounts were presented to Audit Committee on the 27th of August for your consideration and published ahead of public inspection. We've then commenced and nearly concluded on the external audit of those, and you've just heard the key findings. The key movements as a result of the audit and the fact we're almost a year beyond the balance sheet date. The three key ones, as discussed just previously, a reduction in the council's investment properties of 9.5 million, a reclassification of the COVID support grant. This was a grant we received on the 28th of March, and originally we assumed it was a creditor as sort of income in advance. However, due to the fact there was no conditions on that grant, it was recognised as income and moved to a usable reserve for use during 2021 in response to the COVID pandemic. And there was a downward adjustment in relation to the council's investment in Bristol Holding, as discussed, to increase the in-year impairment to 19.4 million. As part of the just draw your attention to the final page of the supplementary pack. It's just in case you hadn't seen, there's an addendum that we published subsequent to the initial publication, which is an additional disclosure for the post-balance sheet event in relation to the Bristol Beacon, as previously discussed at this meeting. So that would be included in the final accounts for publication and sign off, just in case just wanted to draw your attention in case you hadn't spotted that on the end of that report and dispatch. So just to say, in approving the accounts, you need to consider whether you see that the accounts reflect a true and fair view of the council as at the 31st of March, taking into account what you've heard today, your own review of the accounts and the audit findings that you've just heard from Grant Thornton. So willing to take any questions more specifically on the accounts if there are any.
Tim.
Yeah, I have a problem. I don't think I have the supplementary pack. And I've just realised that whole agenda item, I was referring to the main accounts. Everyone else was referring to the Grant Thornton report. I don't think I have a copy of that. And I don't have those others. I have two supplementary publications in my pack, and both of them are public forum. Has it been mispublished on my iPad?
Tim, all I could say is I have a group of the Audit Committee members, so you would have been included and gotten everything that the rest of the membership has. Happy to send it to you outside of this meeting if that helps, or do you want it now?
So on gov.whatever, sorry, So I'm not operating 100% today. I've got the agenda. I got 2 supplementary publications for today's meeting. When I open both of them, they both open up as public forum. Should there only be one forum?
Yeah, I don't understand that, because there were 2 separate publication supplementaries. One was the biggest one, which was done last week, that had about 5 separate items, and then I separately published public forum today. So
I don't know if it overrode the other supplementary package, but I don't have that. So I just need to declare, I think, as a committee member, I don't have those other supplementary papers, I'm afraid. I have the main agenda and I have the public forum, but that is all I have.
Yeah,
Chair, would you like me to email it to Councillor Kent right now?
of course. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you can email it to, but I doubt I'll be able to read it all in time, but that'd be great.
173 pages per page. We'll give you a couple of minutes.
Thanks.
Yeah, I know my ModGov hasn't worked for a while. I just get my stuff off the council main website, really, because it's, unless there's confidential stuff, it's all the same anyway.
I mean, just to clarify, I'm in the private section of mod.gov. I don't know if that makes any difference. But
yeah, I was able to get into that.
It's all public, Councillor Kent, so there'd be no need to be in private.
I just automatically go to the private section. Otherwise, I won't know if there's private paperwork that I should be seeing if I go to the public section. So I always automatically go to the private section just to make sure I have all the paperwork.
Yeah, to be fair, if you go to private, you'd get everything, but you'd get private stuff if there had been private stuff. So you would get the open and the closed stuff.
It looks like mod.gov has made some form of error, that's all.
Really? I'm shocked. Okay.
I've just gone on to mod.gov. It is there.
Okay.
They're both there. Both the supplementary.
I'll kind of load in to mod.gov. You never know, that might fix it. I'll try that now.
Well, Chair, just to clarify, my supplementary thing that is the one that Tim's missing just pinged up randomly late yesterday evening when I was reading the other stuff. So I was quite impressed. I thought, is Alison at work at that 9:45 on a Sunday evening? I thought we really do not pay her enough if she's got that level of dedication to sending out paperwork. But
to be fair, it was done last week, so I don't know why it's just popping up with you now. Anyway, Councillor Kent, I've just sent it as a PDF in an email to you.
Okay, thank you, Alison. Right, so we've been over a number of issues that are of interest to people and concern to people. Is there anything else, Jeff?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, I think Michael and Denise and the team have done a fantastic job, and this is a truly mind-boggling set of accounts. So, so what I'm saying isn't critical of that, but I've been satisfied on most of the other issues, but on Bristol Energy, I do not believe the accounts provide the information that I would expect them to for an end user to be able to fully understand the situation. So I would have liked to see a note in the accounts explaining the full extent of the write-off to the City Council. And I believe that that would be part of giving a true and fair presentation to an end user. I would like, I think it's note 5, the post-balance sheet event note, reviewed and reworded, because I do not believe that that provides clarity to anyone trying to understand it. In fact, I think it provides exactly the opposite. So I have very significant reservations on those 2 issues.
Okay, thank you for that point, Jeff.
Is it worthwhile just noting that in reality it's the group of accounts that we're consolidating, and that we're not sort of, Bristol Energy will have their own accounts that they audit. What we're putting together is the consolidated group accounts and a post-balance sheet note that reflects the group. And within that note, we have tried to expand to give greater granularity and sections relating to Bristol Energy and the impairment. We tried to combine the 2 so we can reflect the position on the group and then the total position in relation to Bristol Energy, in a section at the end that completely explains the fact that we estimate that the impairment value is nil, and then explaining also the potential up to 7.3 million indemnity and some of the movements within that. So from my own view, I think we've been really clear on what we think the position is and the potential risk going forward up to March 22-23.
But Chair, from my point of view, I see that as presented as separate items rather than a combination of items which arrive at the total, and I think we should be showing the total clearly for all to see, and I think that is a significant and material figure in terms of the accounts, and it should be presented as such.
Right. Any other points on the accounts before we vote on them? No. Okay. I just want to be clear. Tim, before we go to vote.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just check? The supplementary pack I've received is 51 pages long. Is that correct? Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I heard 170 odd being mentioned, but I think someone was winding.
Yeah,
up.
I was trying to look at something else. Okay. So then that gives me before we do, I'm just to clarify. Do Adebola and Simon get votes when it comes to voting on the annual accounts? No, you don't. No. Okay, councillors only then, please.
Sorry, Chair. Before we move to the vote,
Yep.
I'm in a slightly uncomfortable position here because, of course, I thought I had read all the paperwork.
Mhm.
Only really when Jeff started pointing to pages of the report, I thought this is all a bit strange. And then I realised that I was missing a whole report. What is my position? I mean, I have the accounts and I have obviously read through those. What I did not have was the Grant Thornton report. Even though
Oh, right. Okay.
I spent the whole debate talking
Yeah.
about it. Can I just check what is the position regarding the Grant Thornton report to us adopting the accounts? Simply because
Well, Grant Thornton have said they're giving an unqualified view of the accounts. They're giving a qualified view of the value for money statement because of the Bristol Energy situation. But so in other words, the accounts are unqualified. So as far as Grant Thornton's concerned,
I guess I'm checking with my legal officer here that it's okay for me to go ahead and vote. There's no question over this little minor IT glitch that I should not participate in the vote.
Yeah, shall I just come in there briefly to
good idea.
allay Councillor Kent's concerns? The matters in the external auditor's report have been reported to this committee previously to a certain extent, and as far as I can recall, Councillor Kent, you have been at the committee when those reports have been considered. So you're not missing 50 pages of information that you've never been privy to previously. So you've had a presentation from the external auditors on that information this afternoon as well. So as far as I'm concerned, I think you are okay to vote this afternoon.
Thank you.
And I can confirm that our presentation from myself at very high level, but Jackson in the detail did cover off all the salient points, Councillor.
Okay. Well, thank you, Tim, and thank you, John. That's very helpful. Okay, then. So, right, we need to raise our hands on the screen, or we're going to hit the little blue things. Raise our hands on the screen. Okay. Alison?
It would be easier in terms of doing a vote if you could go through each member and say whether they approve or not too.
Okay. All right then. Right, start at the top. So, Jeff.
I don't approve, Chair.
Okay. Tim.
I think I'm going to abstain, Chair.
Okay. Ollie.
I'll approve, Chair.
Chris.
Sorry, I got to keep my video off because it keeps kicking me out the meeting. I approve.
Okay, I also approve. So we have three votes in favour, 1 against and 1 abstention. They are therefore passed. Thank you very much. Next, we're moving on to the review of the Code of Corporate Governance, and that one is for Tim.
Thank you, Chair. I'll briefly introduce the report. So this is a refresh of the Council's Code of Corporate Governance, which was last reviewed and approved by the Audit Committee in 2018 as part of the Council's requirement to produce an annual governance statement as required under the Accounts and Audit Regulations. A review of the effectiveness of the Council's Code of Corporate Governance is also required. So timely that it's coming to this committee as we are in the process of looking at, as we will be approving the Code of Corporate Governance at the next meeting of this committee. The Code of Corporate Governance is based on a CIPFA framework, delivering good governance in local government, which sets out a number of core principles, and the code itself provides details of how the council ensures good governance, oversight and accountability, and monitoring and reporting of matters relating to corporate governance, and how the council complies with the 7 principles as set out in the CIPFA framework. The report contains an appendix which has got a lot of detail in it, which explains how the council has been discharging its functions and the matters that we have in place, and those things which we are developing, which align with the various principles in the code. I don't propose to go through that in detail. The principal changes to the document from what this committee has seen previously are in the appendix, and in particular in the right-hand column, which provides an update on additional things that are being developed by the council to comply with the principles of the code. That's all by way of introductory remarks, Chair, but happy to take questions.
Thank you, Tim. Any questions for Tim? No? No? Comments at all? No? Okay. Well, that was an easy gig, Tim. No questions. Thank you very much. We have to note that one, don't we? That's right.
That's correct.
Yeah.
No, sorry, you are approving it, Chair.
Oh, we are approving it.
Yeah.
In that case, one by one, or as on the screen, Tim. Tim, are you voting for or against or?
Sorry, I was busy coughing.
I wasn't sure of coughing or hiccups. Okay.
I think I'm going to abstain simply because I had problems following that, I'm afraid. I'm beginning to feel iller. So I'm going to do my best to stay in the meeting, but
okay.
I'm not feeling 100%. Sorry.
There's not a huge amount to go. If you do feel the need to leave, I shall understand. Don't worry.
I'm sure everything Tim said was golden then, but I there.
Okay. Jeff, are you voting for or against or abstaining? Okay. You're on mute, Jeff.
For.
Ollie?
For.
Christopher?
For, Chair.
And I'm voting for as well. Okay, the next item we have on the agenda is council procedures. Now, having looked at this, there's actually not a lot. I mean, there are some minor changes here. But I take the view that this is largely just a tidying up exercise, changing the rules from where they are at present to where we are to what we do anyway. I know there's supposed to be a presentation on this, but I'm going to ask members if they feel that we need that, or we can just, having read it, can we just note it as it is? How do we feel?
Can I just make one comment, Chair?
Yeah.
Which was in terms of public forum deadlines. To me, we should be making it as easy as possible for members of the public to contribute through public forum.
Right.
And I understand why, from an admin point of view, making it 2 days is good practice and all sorts of things. But I have to say, the 1 day, I sit there, even when I have public forum items that I disagree with, I find it exciting that people want to take the trouble to be involved and submit them. And I just worry if we're making it harder and more challenging and people with more deadlines to comply with. So I would prefer it was still one day before.
I've always, I take the contrary view. I always thought it was too little notice, because the number of times I've been to a full council meeting where the Lord Mayor has said all councillors have read all the statements, and it's just not true, because they come out at midday. You've been to work in the morning, you've turned up, and there's 50 or 60 statements, and quite frankly, there have been many occasions where I haven't had the chance, and I suspect I'm not the only one. So I think allowing more space will actually allow councillors more time to consider the views of the public, which I think is a struggle at present. Any other thoughts? Tim?
Mine was on a separate topic. I wanted to sort of just question the change to CPR 13, rules of debate, and it was the right of reply. So suggesting putting a right of reply for a mover of an amendment, which I don't completely oppose, but I just want to check. Are you removing the right of reply of the original mover of the motion?
I think from reading it, not. Would I be right, Tim?
That's correct, Chair. Yeah.
Right. Okay, that's fine then. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I wouldn't have. I would have been concerned about that one. Yeah. Okay. I think we'll be asked to note this one. That's correct, isn't it?
Chair, you're being asked to endorse it because the final decision would be one for full council.
Okay. Right. In that case, we'll have to take another vote. Oh, a lot of votes today. Okay. Starting at the top. Tim Kent.
Although I'm not completely sold on the change of public notice, I'll vote for this.
Okay. Jeff.
I'll vote for it.
Okay. Ollie.
I'll vote for it, yeah.
Chris?
I'll vote for it, Chair. Thank you.
And I shall vote for it as well. Okay. The next item is internal audit draft plan. Simba.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon all. As usual, I'll take this report as read, Chairman, but I'd like to make a few opening remarks. First, I'd like to welcome colleagues from KPMG, Neil Houston and Mellen Watson, Director and Senior Manager respectively, who are working with us, our internal audit partners. The Audit Committee is requested today, Chairman, to approve the 2021 Internal Audit Plan in Appendix 2 and to consider whether the plan addresses the committee's assurance needs, whether the plan captures key areas that would be expected, and whether there are any significant gaps in the plan. This plan has been developed, Chairman, in compliance with the public sector internal audit standards. And in drafting this plan, we have considered a lot of issues as detailed in Appendix A. However, in summary, we have considered the COVID-19 longevity and the response activities, taking into account the recognition that the recovery will take a long time to deliver. We have also considered the global risk report produced by the World Economic Forum, as well as the Chartered Institute of Internal Auditors Risk in Focus 2021, World Topics for Internal Auditors. We have considered some of the work that we carried forward from 2021, grant audits requiring certification, the risk registers, the key financial systems, the complexity and huge capital change programs. And one key element is the assurance mapping that has been undertaken, which is Appendix 1 of the main report. We also take into account the need to undertake follow-up work from previous audits and the increased use of data analytics. Obviously, there are many areas to audit in any year, but we do not have sufficient skills to cover everything. So we have to prioritize our work. In doing so, our risk assessment matrix includes materiality, inherent risk, and audit history. In developing the plan, we have consulted senior management, CLB, external auditors, and KPMG. In terms of resourcing, the plan will be delivered largely by the in-house team and supported by our colleagues from KPMG. You will remember the committee we discussed in May 2020, the introduction of the rolling plan methodology. It is no longer viable to set definitive priorities for the year, so the Audit Committee will continue to review this plan quarterly, agreeing priorities for the coming quarter. The proposed priorities for Q1 are highlighted in green in Appendix 2. In essence, the plan sets out the potential audit areas in 2021-22, which are subject to change to consider emerging risks and issues. I believe, Chairman, that the plan will enable us to deliver an annual opinion, and I am satisfied that we have the required resources to deliver in terms of capacity and expertise. Chairman, I'll stop here because the reports that I've seen are detailed, and also and I will take any questions from all the appendices. Thank you.
Thank you, Simba. Do we have any questions or points to make for Simba? Adebola. And then Simon.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Simba, for your report and for sharing the draft plan. Just 2 points for clarification. So on the plan page, I believe it's page 247, where you, Appendix 2, where you share the priorities. One of those is assurance mapping. And I think, can you just confirm if that activity, for that activity, you intend to give an opinion, or is just continuation of activity to help you determine further work? Because earlier in the report, you had presented a map or the output of some work you had done. So that's question 1. And then question 2, very quickly, more an observation, is I noticed some of the audits on the plan just seem to cover, the title just looks very much the same. And it's just to understand why. So for instance, you have capital projects assurance, then you have capital projects embedded assurance. And it's just to understand, I see you have similar around IT risk assessment, and you also have similar around sort of information security, where you have asset management, asset governance, then you have information security, and then you have information security management. So I guess it's just to understand why you've positioned those that way. And then the other point around the assurance mapping activity. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take that, Chair. Thank you.
Yeah.
So the first question, assurance mapping. So you see that from the report, what we did assurance mapping based on strategic risks. What we want to do, the next phase is want to do assurance mapping based on functions on the second lines of defense to give us a whole picture in terms of the assurance arrangement. So we won't be providing an opinion, but that work will inform the future work, and we are hoping to bring that outcome to the audit committee. So that's the first one. So the second one, I think the reason why we've got a number of topics is that it reflects the extent of the work that is required. So on capital programs, the first work relates to testing the adequacy and appropriateness of the governance framework on the capital programs. Okay, the governance. Then the next one, when we talk about program assurance, we are looking at doing undertaking a select or a sample number of projects to ensure to provide assurance whether they are delivering on time, within budget, and to deliver the outcomes. Then when we talk of embedded assurance, we are talking about working with the projects, advising on project risk, governance, internal control. That's why they are split in that way. And I think it's important because it reflects the nature of the risks and some of the improvements required in the different areas. So in terms of IT risk assessment, what we have done is we have said IT risk assessment, then there's a provision of IT assurance work. So the IT risk assessment is we would want to spend a bit of time undertaking a risk assessment of the war control environment. By understanding the war control environment, we identify the highest risks and those highest risk will then be assessed against the provision. So the first element is understand the risks, and then that which will give us the understanding of the emerging risks. And then the provision for assurance will relate to, having done the risk assessment, will then have to do additional work to test or to provide assurance in those areas that have been identified by the assessment.
Okay, you happy with that one then, Adalberto?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Anne. Thank you, Tim.
Okay. Next up, Simon.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of quick points. Simba, I think it would be helpful for the next meeting if, on the assumption the plan is approved for the audits, just to have a rough indication of which audit committees they're going to come to help the new committee with its work programme. And also, Chair, just to make sure we don't lose the areas we're potentially going to recommend the new committee to consider or to potentially ask in internal audit to pick up. And just to say, I did have a similar question to Addy about the use of the assurance map and how that would drive the work, but I think that's something we can pick up separately, Simba, and good to see so much around the recovery from COVID-19, particularly around the lessons learned and the opportunities there as well. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I would hope that the new chair of the audit committee, whoever it is, will see a copy of the minutes and read through them and see what we've said. So if you can make sure that Simon's comments are in the minutes, Alison, and that way the train will not be lost, as it were. Any more questions or comments for Simba? No?
Oh, yep.
Oh, Jeff, sorry.
I was looking at the table on page 254 in terms of the number of days, and the first question was regarding schools governance and whether that just relates to Bristol, effectively former local authority schools rather than academies. And if it does, are those numbers still reducing because we've got the same number of days in for each of the 3 comparative years? And I was just wondering if there was any reflection of the number of schools it applies to.
This less to the maintained schools. However, given the situation with COVID, we didn't do enough work last year, so we need to recover this year. If we had done enough work in 2021, it means that obviously probably the number of days would have reduced in 21-22. But given that we haven't done any significant work in schools because of COVID, we have to do at least some substantial work.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Simba. Reasonable answer, it seems to me. Okay. That's it. That seems to be it. So yeah. So, I take it we can approve Simba's plan. Yeah. Everybody's nodding. Not taking a vote. We just take on the nod. Thank you very much, Simba. Now, annual whistleblowing review. It's Simba again.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Before I start, Alison, can I confirm, Alison Malice, can I confirm whether colleagues from SWAP are in?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Would you like me to take this piece?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll take. That's fine. I'll introduce, then I'll pass on to you, colleague. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, the purpose of this report is for the Audit Committee to receive the annual independent report on the Council's whistleblowing arrangements. As internal auditor now responsible for managing the arrangements, it is no longer appropriate for us to undertake this annual review due to the self-review risk. The independent audit has been completed by colleagues from the Southwest Audit Partnership, SWAP, following a compliant procurement process. Just for clarity, Chairman, there is no commercial relationship between SWAP and the Council or with internal audit. Colleagues from SWAP are here to present their report and they'll introduce themselves when the time comes. In summary, Chairman, the overall opinion on the arrangement was substantial assurance, which is an improvement from last year's reasonable assurance opinion. We'll be bringing to the next committee meeting a full report on whistleblowing arrangement, summarizing improvements, implementation of agreed actions, planned for future actions, and summaries of outcomes from completed investigation. With your permission, Chairman, can I welcome Moya and Sue to this meeting and ask them to present the report? Moya, can you introduce yourselves? And we'll probably take questions amongst ourselves. Thank you, Chairman.
Absolutely, Simba, no problem at all.
Hello, thank you. Good afternoon. My name's Moya Moore. I'm an Assistant Director at SWAP Internal Audit Services. And we were commissioned to do an independent review of the whistleblowing arrangements at the Council. So we carried out this work over January, February, reporting in March. And it was assigned to us, as Simba said, so that we could do an independent review of the revised whistleblowing arrangements in place since April 2020, when the functional responsibility for whistleblowing transferred to internal audit from where it previously sat, which was HR. So specifically, we looked at the referral process, so how things get reported. We looked at the assessment process, so the decision making about how to handle issues that have been raised. We looked at the investigatory process and the reporting side of things, all within the context of the Council's whistleblowing procedures and through the lens of transparency and accessibility for staff. So we have awarded a substantial rating, which is the highest rating available, which means that the key controls are in place that we would expect to see and they're operating effectively. So we're satisfied that there's clear guidance and reporting mechanisms and mechanisms also to protect whistleblowers should they choose to make a referral. So we were also happy that investigations were carried out appropriately and reporting was reasonable. Areas of good practice that we found, we were very happy that there was clear guidance about how to make a report, clear mechanisms to protect whistleblowers, as I've mentioned. Arrangements were set out very clearly in the staff code of practice, and there was mandatory training as well. Agency workers received a good level of guidance in their handbook. And we were happy that there was regular reporting to Audit Committee, although I'll come on to recommendations in just a moment. We reviewed the central database for referrals, so everything comes into one central location and is handled through that central spot. And there's also a response protocol, so that helps direct the decision making about how particular cases should be reviewed and investigated. There were 3 findings, all relatively minor. I'd say we scored them a priority 3, which means that they're action required, but not a significant finding. I mean, the first of these was around version control of the whistleblowing policy. So we understand that has been reviewed actually in March 2020, but the document itself wasn't dated or was without version control. So we felt that was important to be done. The second recommendation was around awareness. So we felt that there was an opportunity for the Council to publicise whistleblowing a little bit more than it currently is, particularly around volunteers. So we didn't feel that volunteers received significant guidance about how to make a whistleblowing referral should they want to. And we also felt there was an opportunity to publicise successful prosecutions more throughout the Council. So not necessarily council related ones, but from other organisations as well, just to evidence that the prosecutions do take place, and just to publicise the issue a little bit more and make it part of culture to understand that whistleblowing is acceptable, the norm, and will be handled correctly. And the final recommendation that we made was around Audit Committee reporting. So while we were happy that Audit Committee reporting was happening on a reasonable frequency, the reports that we looked at showed the number of cases that had opened and the number of cases that had closed, but it didn't give much explanation about why those cases had closed and whether there was any learning points coming out of them. Actually, when we looked into what those cases were, there wasn't much coming out of them. They were closed through satisfactory reasons, and you know, there was no case to answer on any of them. But nevertheless, I think for future, just a point to note for the future is that perhaps a little bit more explanation could be given to the committee, although I accept that may have been given verbally at the time the report was received. We did a survey as well, so we asked a random sample of staff and agency workers about their experiences and feelings around whistleblowing. There was no surprises in that. There was still an appetite to report anonymously, but there was no concern over current arrangements, in the way that the Council's currently operating its whistleblowing policy. So for those reasons, we have awarded a substantial assurance rating. I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, I'd just like to say, I think that to see our rating improve like that it's very reassuring, because I know a number of us have been worried for a while about whistleblowing, and we seem to have come a long way, and I'm very happy about that, because people need to be able to feel confident. It's for the benefit of the organisation as much as it's for the benefit of the staff, and yeah, I'm thrilled about that. The notes about reporting to the Audit Committee, hopefully we'll take note of that, so the next Audit Committee has the cases reported in the way that Moya has said. And thank you, Moya, for coming along and presenting the report. Does anybody have any questions or for Moya, or any points they'd like to make? No, see, they're all happy. Oh, Simba.
Chairman, just for the record that we have accepted all the recommendations and they'll be implemented.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, I'd assume you would. I mean, these are, you know, it's like you say, level 3. So, but yes, thank you very much. Okay, thank you for coming along, and we'll move on to our next item, which is contract management. Lee Hannon, I believe, is
Chair, Lee's just in the waiting room. He was coming when the item was when we were at this item, so he's literally just arriving. I'm letting him in now.
Okay, thank you. Welcome, Lee.
Hello. Good afternoon, everyone.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen shortly, just to introduce myself for those I've not met. Lee Hannon, I'm the Strategic Supply Relations Manager. Just to update everyone today on where we are with the contract management implementation, a piece of work been going on for a little while now within scoping, just moving into approval, sign off process now, and then implementation. I'll just share my screen. So thank you for the invitation. Just a few slides to go through, and a couple in particular to focus on, and I'll be grateful to sort of any comments or steer or recommendation for any additional activity we may need to go through. So these slides here would just provide a summary of audit actions and why we're needing to do anything about contract management at all, and then a little bit of information about what we've done so far and where we hope to take this over the next few weeks and next couple of months. So it started back in 2018, really. We've had a number of audit actions which have identified a few areas or opportunities to improve with regards to contract management, lack of information, lack of contract records, and certainly some opportunities to standardise. What we have done is reached out to a number of neighbouring authorities and found that it's not a unique position. It seems to be a lot of councils are working in the same sort of way, and we're trying to catch up with contract management and working in a more effective way. So what we've done since July last year really is implemented a new subsection of the what was previously the procurement service. So the procurement service as it used to exist no longer does. Back in July last year, on the back of a restructure, a new sub-element of that team was born, which is the Strategic Supply Relations Service. So that's all starting in July, really. So that's where I sit. It's a relatively small team at the moment. We're growing. At the moment, we've got sort of just a handful of people who are either new to the business or new to this team. A few opportunities have come about as well. There are two halves to what we do, really. One half is contract management. We do have some contract managers in post who look after a couple of our strategic contracts, namely PFI and at the moment our facilities management contracts as well. The other half of what we do isn't contract management, but it's ensuring contract management. So this is where we're hoping to and looking to implement a contract management framework, ways of working, and ensure that there's an effective contract management practice across the organisation with a kind of find and fix mechanism to hop in and support if need be. So what have we done since July? There's been a number of activities actually. We've done a lot with stakeholder engagement. We've done a review of our current systems, and then we've looked at contract classification and an activities list as well. I'm just going to go through each one of those in a little bit more detail. The stakeholder engagement we knew was quite important. We have at the moment a non-centralised approach to contract management. In that we have a number of contract managers placed throughout the organisation in different services. And in some cases that's quite effective. And there's a really good level of contract management is really effective. In some areas, there's a little bit of room to improve. So we're looking at standardising that approach. And one thing we wanted to do was talk to all of the existing contract managers at the moment to find out what works well and what the priorities are. What we could have done would have been locked ourselves away and come up with a way of working and some rules and a framework on our own in isolation. What we knew was quite important was the change of culture, and we wanted to make sure our contract managers shared with us the current good practice and brought that along with us. So what we've done, we've hosted a number of stakeholder engagement sessions. Initially, I reached out to 75 individuals who were identified as contract managers and contract owners who we wanted to understand a little bit more about what we did. I wasn't sure if they'd all turned up. They did. They brought their friends as well. So we actually hosted a number of stakeholder engagement sessions over a few weeks and spoke to 100 different contract managers who helped us learn a little bit more about the way of working we need to implement. We've done a piece of work on a grading tool to make sure that our contracts are grouped into one of 4 different categories, where each category of contract would be subject to a different level of contract management. So the low risk, low value would be very much sort of keeping the lights on, processing invoices and ensuring accuracy, right through to what we're currently phrasing our strategic contracts, which are ones which will involve a lot more dedicated contract management resource and continuous performance monitoring. We've looked at a list of tasks and activities, which would be typical of any one of those 4 groups. The most comprehensive list of tasks for the highest ranking contracts as well. And another key item as well, an enabler of the new way of working and the wider efficiencies is looking at a contract management system. We have a number at the moment, all of which just doing a little bit of work. So we're looking at a new proposal to do everything in one place quite well. So with the stakeholder engagement, when we gathered our 100 colleagues together, we asked them 3 key questions really, which were, do you use a system to manage your contracts? The answer was generally yes and no. Some services have systems which almost act as more of a contract register. Some services have systems which act more as a performance monitoring tool as well, which is a little bit better. No system enables reporting. So a bit of a gap for us at the moment is being able to report to our colleagues and members and senior leaders on contract status, contract performance. So a little bit of a mix, and some services just using spreadsheets. Do we use any tools or methods to classify your contracts was the second question. The answer was generally no. Colleagues understood that there were different levels of contract management applicable to different contracts, but it was generally just by sort of gut feeling, sometimes by way of contract value, contracts of a certain value or contracts delivering certain services were treated a little bit differently, but it varied again between services. And the last question we asked were, do you have any common activities or reporting methods? And again, a mixture of different answers from across the organisation where different teams had embedded different levels of routine reporting. So again, a bit of a mix and certainly some opportunities to improve in different areas as well. So the systems review was interesting. Colleagues fed back that there are a number of systems which all did things in a slightly different way. So we met with all colleagues who use a system, whether it be a spreadsheet or a purchase system, and asked them what they use it for. We identified, well, we mixed all of those findings together and we made a list of 75. It's actually 77 now. We've added a couple more in on the back of the emerging IT strategy to look at these 77 elements which a contract management system must have to enable us to do everything we needed to do. We evaluate our existing systems. We had 4 in addition to the spreadsheets. And then we spoke to our neighbouring authorities and other market leaders, and we looked at a couple of options there. We've got a forerunner in Proactis who looking to potentially meet all of our needs, and that's there's an approval process going through at the moment to look and see if that could become our system of choice, give us an opportunity to switch off some of these other systems as well. The contract management framework and selection of a contract management system. So a little bit of work to be done with signing that off and moving that along. It's all attached to the general implementation of the contract management framework, quite a large project piece of work. So it is an enabler of that. What we will be doing is promoting this. So our team of 100+ contract managers who we continue to talk to, it wasn't effective to continue to keep all of them in a loop, and it wasn't the best use of their time. So we'd asked all services to volunteer 1 champion, and we now have a group of 15 contract management champions who are helping us along our pathway. So nothing gets through without sort of talking to them and making sure that all the proposals and solutions we're putting forward meet their needs, and that we design something which is actually fit for purpose, whether that be a system or a way of working, a classification, or the tasks and activities we're going to ask people to do when they're managing contract in a new way of working. Also, a lot of development and training. We're going to make sure that colleagues are equipped with the sort of knowledge, skill, and experience they need to manage contracts, whether it be a small contract right through to one of our strategic statutory contracts as well. There's going to be a series of newsletters, drop-in sessions, escalation procedures, and lots of points of contact meetings. I think we've done quite well so far. We've gone to a number of directors, head of service meetings just to promote a little bit more about this evolving way of working. We've got an indicative timeline at the moment of May, which should be hopefully all going well, everything signed off and our new way of working both adopted and embedded. The contract classification I mentioned a moment ago, what we need to do is make sure that our particular way of working and the tasks and activities we expect of all of our contract managers is appropriate, both in making sure we capture everything, but also appropriate in that it's not too much work and it doesn't become overly onerous, and we're not asking for an exceptional level of contract management for low risk, low value contracts. So we are looking at a classification tool. We've met with a number of neighbouring authorities. We looked at a lot of government standards, grouping contracts into, at the moment, in our provisional standard, calling them low, medium, high, and super high. We are working with our risk management team to come up with a more accurate naming convention for that. And it's kind of up for debate at the moment of what we call those. There was talk of routine, operational, critical through to strategic, but we use those terms for other factors. One of the very early stages was tiers 1, 2, 3, and 4. That certainly hasn't aged well, but I think we're going to look at a number of different options and make sure we come to an agreement on that. It's quite an important element, we feel. We've got a tool in development at the moment, which, we've got this to a final solution position, actually. So it is quite a simple tool, which will be embedded within our contract management system of choice, which means when a procurement activity takes place, that contract is classified. That will be a joint decision between, a joint activity of completing this questionnaire between whoever will be the contract owner and the procurement lead. So we do that for consistency. If it is deemed to be a strategic contract, then it would come to my team who would validate that, yes, it would be a strategic contract and therefore subject to a number of other activities. This is a tool which we will use to slot our contracts into one of those 4 different categories. And this is an example here of Jack, who works in print services, who's one of our champions. He's helping us along our journey. And Jack's making sure that this document is asking the right questions and coming up with the right answers. The activities list, sorry, I'll just jump back. So as you can see, it will drop contracts into one of 4 groups. Depending on what 4 groups there are, there will be a number of tasks and activities associated to that. This is just the top of a very long list of up to 98 tasks for our most strategic contracts. And again, we've taken our contract managers along the journey with us to make sure that these tasks are reflective of what we currently do, and maybe in some cases, things we should be doing which maybe aren't, or things which we should be doing or are doing but maybe aren't documented correctly. So this is just the top of the list, but by no means all of it. It does go down and down and down. The 98 tasks would be applicable for our top contracts. We anticipate will be contracts with an annual spend in excess of £3 million delivering statutory services, or suppliers delivering statutory services who are unique and not easily replaced, who we need to keep a very close watch on. Those 98 tasks is really that's an extreme. 3 of those relate to maintaining and monitoring 2P data. So if it's a contract which doesn't include 2P, those 3 tasks won't apply. But in some cases they will. What we've sought agreement and gained from our contract champions is that it's not overly bureaucratic, and that these are activities which should absolutely be done and documented, and we should be able to be audited and monitor that as well. So again, this list is quite agile. So if the landscape changes ahead of us, and we're hoping to and we're looking to add something in because it becomes quite important to us as a service or a council or a city, then we can change and adapt that as well. The joy is with these the new way of working contract management rules being owned by one team with links into the whole service, we can adapt and respond quite quickly. So we've got some dates in here around what we've done so far. There's 3 blocks of color there, with the green section at the top being the handbook, the rules, the written procedures, the protocols, and everything we are hoping our ways of working. All of this, of course, subject to their own decision pathways. The yellow is the contract management system. So where we are at the moment, we're looking at we're a little bit behind schedule on that, and I'm taking a decision paper to CRB next week for review to look at proceeding with a system and then the implementation which will follow. We got a really good team and partnership with the proposed contractor anyway, so we should be able to catch up and tighten up on those timescales to get things back on track. And then the blue section at the bottom, which is very much sort of moving along now, which is around the knowledge sharing and information sharing, and our service acting as a bit of a hub for making sure everyone is, we want to make sure they've got the tools for the job in the system, and they've got access to all the information in the procedures, but we also want to make sure that they've got the comfort and confidence to impose those rules and work through those rules, and have a team like our service to come to should they need support, whether that be escalation or whether they've got a new starter who will be responsible for an outside organisation, and therefore they need a little bit of shadowing or training experience on working with supply chain. We're also aiming to promote this as much as we can. So we're keeping in touch with our colleagues and contract managers all along the journey. They're very, very aware of the pipeline we're on with regards to getting things signed off and what decisions we're proposing. We're going to be at one of our upcoming leadership forums to make sure if anyone's missed out so far, which may not be many people, if any at all, are certainly aware that if you look after an outside organisation and you're responsible for managing a contract, the way in which you work is likely going to change for the better, and we want you colleagues on board with that. We're going to do a number of lunchtime learning sessions for April and May, where colleagues can drop in and find out a little bit more about who to talk to, who the team are, and what we can do. We're going to do some regular updates to colleagues with internal comms and the source, and certainly over the next few weeks and months, you're not going to be able to hide away from all the good news around contract management. It's going to be everywhere. It's going to be really positive. And again, working with our supply chain and letting them know that actually things are going to change, and that's a good thing. And we're going to be talking to you a lot more about what you do for us, and it's a positive. In most cases, it'd be a real positive as well. And then continuous review. So beyond May, the likelihood is, we will have a system and a way of working, and certainly a change in culture with regards to contract management, which is much better than where we've been, and as the previous audit reports have indicated, we are. But what it will be, and what it will need to be, is agile and easily adapted, because things move quickly, and I think our team will be very much on the ball, continuing to talk with service managers, and that there'll be new services we're looking at and changes to services, and certainly subcontracted services, and we need to make sure that we are flexible and that we can keep on top of contract management, because it does move very quickly. So hopefully the aim of this short presentation was just to update everyone on where we are with our contract management journey. May is the key date to remember, and I think we're going to be promoting it as much as we can between now and May, and certainly going through different decision pathways as well. I would be really grateful of an opportunity to come back beyond May and update everyone as to where we are. And by that point, the aim is to have these proposed solutions as actual solutions, and where we can start demonstrating what we're doing now and how the benefits are coming through. And then I will pause there.
Thank you, Lee. Well, that was clearly a huge piece of work that you and your colleagues have been undertaking. Very impressive, as far as I can see. You certainly seem to be pulling things together. Obviously, next May will be a different audit committee. So again, if we can make note of this one for them to consider for their work program, we're not allowed to tell them to. Does anybody have any questions for Lee? Yes, Adebola.
Thank you very much, Chair. And thank you very much, Lee. Like the Chair said, that was a very detailed presentation. You know, it shows you have a good grasp of the program delivery, so well done. A very quick question, just for my own understanding. Can you please clarify? So from what I'm hearing is that this system is being built to classify and also serve as a reporting tool on contracts. Does it include sort of the downstream processes? So the requisition and approvals for those contracts, does it happen within this system? The reason why I ask is, if it doesn't, then that risk still remains. How do you ensure the risk of completeness of information within this system remains? So if there are two separate systems doing separate things, how do you ensure that the information ultimately you capture within here is indeed complete for effective contract management? I hope that makes sense. I'm happy to.
No, that makes perfect sense, and thank you very much. It's a really good question. As you point out, they are very different systems. So the proposal is to have a sourcing and procurement system, and then a separate contract management system. The proposal for the contract management system is to work with a solution called Proactis, which is the sister product of ProContract, our e-sourcing tool. So there should be a seamless link. So what will happen is we will undertake a compliant procurement activity, and when the approved supplier is appointed, that tender becomes a contract record. It will then move through. It'd be subject to validation by my team and the procurement team to make sure that actually, yes, we've got a signed contract. Yes, we've got an exit strategy. Yes, we've got bonds in place if a contract needs to have bond, and then only then, subject to approval, would that become the contract record. So having those two systems, so they are two systems, yes, but having that link and purchase from the same provider as well, who again we would be subject that we would manage as a supplier to make sure that link remains intact. We're probably getting as close as we can to having a single system without it truly being a single system. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for Lee? No, well, thank you very much, Lee. And yeah, good luck with the rest of your program. It's just as though you don't need it. Right, that brings us to the end of the agenda. But there's a couple of things I want to say before we go. This is my last audit committee meeting, and I'd like to say a few thank yous. I'd like to thank Denise and her finance team for all the amazing work that they do and the hard work that I know they work hard. To Democratic Services for putting up with me and all the other councillors, because I know we're not an easy gig sometimes. You know. I also like to thank Simba and the internal audit team. And I've only known Simba a year or two, but I know some of them for some considerable years. And again, they perform an incredible service. And also, lastly, to the members, Ollie, who's chaired this committee in his time, and to Jeff, who's an absolute bulldog when it comes to the finances, and it's a good thing for the council that he is. and to Tim for playing sick today. So some sort of medal, I suppose, for that. Okay, all right, and of course to Chris. So thank you all, and farewell.
Can I interject before you cut off, if I may?
Okay. All right.
Only to say, I think that from the time you first came on committee, I think you and I served on one of the first audit committees at that time, and have shared scrutiny and audit over all the years since. There have been occasions when you and I have had very different viewpoints, and you've always been very good at expressing that in a very diplomatic but very clear way. But there have been lots of times on audit where we've actually been approaching things from the same point of view, with the same concerns, without politics interfering, but simply with an interest of the best outcome for the authority. I just wanted to say a very, very heartfelt thank you to you. You have played a fantastic role in financial resources and audit governance over that time. I know you will be very sadly missed, and I know that with you, with Ollie going, with Clive gone, and Liz gone as well, the whole issue of how the audit committee function will work with members who have a real concern and understand the reasons for its existence will be a real challenge. But I say it's a heartfelt thank you from me, but I'm hoping I'm saying it on behalf of all the other members of the committee as well.
Thank you, Jeff. Very kind. Thank you.
I would like to endorse all of those words you said there, Jeff, and I'm just going to miss Mark from the Labour group as well. So he's been great over the years. So I would like to endorse those statements as well. All the best, Mark, in the future.
Okay. Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chair, for being our chair. You've done a great job.
Thank you, Tim.
I'm going to miss the fact that we won't be up against each other on the ballot paper. That's what I thought.
Yeah, you're too good for me.
Can I put that on a leaflet?
No. Thank you, folks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.